Sometimes one meeting changes everything. Today you will see a story where the clash of two worlds leads to events no one was prepared for. Watch closely until the very end, because what comes next only gets more intense. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and write in the comments where you are watching from. The soundstage had never felt this quiet. Usually, by this hour, the place was alive with crashing pads, shouted commands, engines of fans, and the hollow thuds of bodies hitting the mats. Today, the air seemed trapped, heavy, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Crew members stood in small clusters along the walls, pretending to check cables and cameras, while secretly watching the man who crossed the glossy floor with steady, unhurried steps. Jason Statham walked like the space belonged to him. Fresh sweat still traced down his forearms, catching the studio lights in thin silver lines. His shoulders rolled once, slowly, loosening muscle and tension at the same time. The echoes of his boots were the loudest sound in the entire hall. He moved with the confidence of someone who had spent his whole life testing limits and breaking past them. At the far corner of the mat sat a man who looked as if he had stepped out of a different world entirely. Seagal did not look up when Jason entered the center of the floor. He sat on a low bench, dressed in a simple black training robe, its fabric falling in calm, straight lines. A small cup of tea rested between his fingers. His posture was relaxed, unguarded, yet there was something about the way he occupied the space that quietly bent the room around him. He had no entourage, no assistance, no showmanship, just stillness. Jason stopped dead center on the mat. Every conversation in the room died at once. He stretched his neck to one side, then the other, until a soft crack snapped through the silence. His eyes stayed locked on the calm figure in the corner. With a slow, deliberate motion, he lifted his arm and pointed. "You," he said, his voice carrying cleanly to the rafters. "Right now. No choreography. No doubles. Let's see what's real." A ripple moved through the room. It started as a breath, then turned into whispers. Several stuntmen shifted on their feet. One of the camera operators instinctively raised his phone before remembering where he was. The tension was no longer quiet. It was exposed. Stephen did not flinch. He did not rise. He did not even blink. He took one more small sip of tea, as unhurried as if he were alone on an empty porch instead of surrounded by dozens of frozen onlookers. Then, finally, his eyes lifted. "Jason," he said softly, almost gently. "Are you sure you want this?" The question was quiet, but it landed with weight. A few people exchanged uneasy glances. Jason's mouth twitched into a half-smile. He rolled his wrists as if warming up for a fight he had been waiting for a long time. "Absolutely." Someone near the lighting rig whispered, barely audible. "Is he serious?" Another replied under his breath, "He is. He really wants to test him." The floor seemed to tighten beneath their feet. Earlier that morning, everything had been different. The hall had been loud then. Jason had been running the younger stunt performers through fast, unforgiving drills. He liked to teach personally, not from a distance. He corrected foot placement with his own boots, adjusted guards with sharp taps of his knuckles, demonstrated combinations at full speed, and then again in slow motion. He pushed them hard, but with purpose. "Rotate your shoulders," he had told one of the new guys, grabbing his arm and guiding the motion. "You're telegraphing the punch. Don't warn your opponent." The stuntman nodded, breathless, and tried again. Jason watched closely, eyes sharp. Better. Laughter, effort, the rhythmic slap of gloves into pads, all of it had filled the space. It was the normal heartbeat of the set. Then the door had creaked open. The sound had been small, but it pulled every head in the room toward it. Stephen had stepped inside quietly. No announcement, no pause for attention. Just a calm, steady walk across the threshold. His robe hung loosely at his waist, sleeves shifting with each soft movement. The tinted lenses of his glasses caught the overhead lights, hiding his eyes in warm reflections. He carried no bag, no equipment, only a small thermos in one hand. Jason had seen him instantly. He had wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his glove and grinned. "You finally decided to show up," he had said loudly. "Thought you'd warmed up with tea long enough." A few crew members had laughed, some nervously, some genuinely. Others had stayed quiet. Stephen had not reacted. He had walked to the side of the room, sat, poured tea into his cup, and waited. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Jason had continued the training, but his attention drifted again and again toward the corner. The stillness there seemed to mock the movement everywhere else. He had cracked another joke, then another, each one sharper than the last. "You hear all these stories," he had said, wrapping his hands and glancing back, "about how fast he is, how unbeatable, how he drops 10 men without breaking sweat." A few quiet chuckles had answered him. "People say a lot of things," Jason had continued. "Let's see if it's skill or just myth." The room had begun to shrink at that point. The easy mood had faded. Even the pads had gone quiet. One of the older coordinators had leaned toward a colleague and murmured, "He shouldn't push him like that. When Stephen moves, it's never for show." Jason had heard none of that, or had chosen not to. He had finally walked across the mat, stopping just a few feet from the seated man. "Just a test," he had said. "Not a fight. Timing. Movement. Technique." Stephen had stirred his tea once, circle smooth and unbroken. Some things aren't proven by force. Jason had laughed quietly. Everything is. Now, in the present, the circle around the mat widened without anyone being told to step back. Instinct alone drove them. They made space the way people always did when something heavy was about to fall. Jason took one slow step forward. Stephen rose from the bench with unhurried ease. The fabric of his robe settled around him. His hands hung relaxed at his sides. No guard, no threat, no sign of preparation. The difference between them could not have been clearer. Jason was heat, breath, motion coiled tight. Stephen was quiet gravity. The producer entered the hall at that moment, schedules in hand, voice raised to ask why rehearsals had stopped. The question died in his throat when he saw the two men facing each other. "Oh no," he whispered. The air thickened. Jason lifted his hands, not in full aggression, but in a light, ready stance. His weight shifted subtly onto the balls of his feet, muscles already calculating distance and timing. His eyes never left the man in front of him. "You wanted respect," he said quietly now. "Earn it." Stephen did not answer. He lowered one palm briefly toward the mat, as if grounding himself, then let it fall again to his side. His posture remained open, unchallenging. For a brief moment, nothing moved. The studio lights hummed. Somewhere in the distance, a door closed. A cough broke and died against the walls. Jason inhaled once, deep and controlled. Then, at last, he stepped in. Jason Statham stepped in with a soft, controlled jab. It was not a strike meant to hurt. It was an invitation, clean and professional, the kind used to test distance and reaction. His fist cut through the air precisely toward Steven Seagal's face, and it met nothing. Not because Stephen had leapt back, not because he had blocked, but because he simply was not there anymore. A half-inch shift, no more than a whisper of movement, sent Jason's punch sliding past empty space. The fabric of Stephen's robe barely stirred. Jason blinked once. That had not looked fast. It had looked early. He tried again. Another jab, slightly quicker. Stephen's torso turned just enough for the glove to miss by the width of a finger. Still no block. Still no guard. Just displacement. A murmur crawled across the edges of the room. "Did you see that?" He didn't dodge. He just wasn't there. Jason's jaw tightened. He raised his guard a little higher and flowed into a smooth three-strike combination. Jab, cross, hook, crisp, professional. Each attack arrived faster than the last, the kind of sequence that forced most opponents to retreat or cover. Stephen did neither. His feet slid as if carried by the floor itself. His shoulders tilted. His center shifted in tiny, economical adjustments that erased every incoming line before it could reach him. The punches passed through empty air as if Jason were striking shadows that refused to solidify. A few phones rose despite the tension. No one made a sound. Jason took one step back, breathing slightly heavier now. Not from effort, from confusion. He attacked again, faster, sharper. Stephen continued to move as though Jason's intentions were being whispered to him in advance. Nothing touched him. Jason's lips parted in disbelief. He had fought trained fighters. He had faced professionals who reacted on instinct alone. What unfolded now felt different. This was not reaction. This was anticipation. For the first time, impatience flared through his control. "All right," he muttered. "Let's stop pretending." He came in harder this time. A straight punch aimed directly at the chest, with no pause, no courtesy. The motion was clean, fast, committed. Stephen turned only slightly. The punch grazed the air beside his robe and slipped past, as if Jason had thrown it into open space. The fabric whispered from the movement, untouched. Jason switched angles. Left hook. Stephen tilted. Right uppercut. Stephen leaned a fraction. A low kick swept toward the thigh. Stephen stepped aside as if the strike had been announced ahead of time. Jason felt something twist tight inside his chest. Frustration. "Stop moving!" he snapped. "I'm not moving," Stephen replied calmly. "You just keep looking where I'm no longer standing." Jason surged forward again, abandoning restraint. A real attempt now. Not for show. Before the fist could fully extend, Stephen finally responded with something other than absence. His hand lifted and tapped Jason's wrist. It was not a strike. It was barely more than a touch. But Jason's arm folded inward, as if the strength had been drained from it mid-motion. His balance shifted. His stance cracked. He stumbled a half-step before catching himself. The room gasped. Jason stared at his wrist, then at Stephen. "What did you just—" Stephen's fingers brushed Jason's shoulder. Another light contact. Another loss of balance. Jason's feet scrambled to recover. His breath sharpened. A wave of whispers rolled through the crew, no longer controlled. "He's not even trying. He's steering him." Stephen lowered his hand again. "I told you," he said evenly. "Some things aren't proven by force." Jason backed away slowly, chest rising and falling. His pride had taken a hit deeper than any physical blow. He had come forward to test a legend. Instead, he had run into something he could not read. He lifted his guard again, this time without a grin. "Let's go again." Stephen did not move. Instead, he looked at him with quiet focus. "Why are you fighting me?" The question stalled Jason mid-step. "What?" "You're not angry," Stephen said, "and you're not threatened. You're trying to prove something." A ripple of unease passed through the circle. Jason hesitated. "And if I am?" "Then your fists are already late," Stephen replied. Silence pressed inward from all sides. Jason exhaled slowly, rubbing the side of his neck. The truth in the words unsettled him more than any failed strike. He had never been neutralized like this in front of an audience, never been read so easily. "Teach me then," he said quietly. Stephen stepped forward for the first time since rising. His movement carried no tension, no challenge. He placed 2 fingers gently beneath Jason's wrist. "Don't tense," he said. "I'm not," Jason replied. Stephen raised an eyebrow. Jason exhaled without realizing he had been holding his breath. The tension drained from his shoulders. Stephen guided Jason's arm through a slow arc. "Feel that?" he asked. Jason nodded. "Balance." "Intention," Stephen corrected. "The body doesn't move first. The mind decides. I don't stop your strikes. I see the decision before the motion." A quiet murmur spread through the room. "That's real Aikido." "That's insane." Jason stared at him in new understanding. "So that's why nobody touches you." Stephen nodded once. A door creaked open at the back of the soundstage. A late-arriving camera operator stepped inside, headphones around his neck. "What did I miss?" No one answered at first. Then one stuntman said quietly, "You missed Jason Statham punching at a ghost." Another added, "And the ghost was drinking tea while dodging." A few scattered nervous laughs escaped the tension. Even Jason let out a short breath that almost sounded like a chuckle. Stephen lifted his hand gently. "No more today," he said. Jason frowned. "Why?" "Because you saw what you needed to see," Stephen replied. The room fell silent again, but the energy had changed. It was no longer electric with conflict. It was dense with awe. No one noticed the small red recording light still blinking on one of the phones. By nightfall, fragments of the footage would be everywhere. By the next morning, the world had caught fire. The quiet tension of the soundstage was gone, replaced by the roar of global attention. Clips from the rehearsal had flooded every platform overnight. Blurry angles, shaking hands, cropped moments that showed only fragments of what had truly happened. Yet it was enough. Two legendary figures in the same frame, one attacking, the other untouched. The internet did the rest. Jason Statham woke to a phone that would not stop vibrating. Messages stacked faster than he could read them. Producers, agents, journalists, old friends from the industry. Every headline carried a different version of the same story. Some called it a friendly sparring session. Others labeled it the beginning of a war between icons. A few went even further, claiming humiliation, collapse, defeat. Jason sat on the edge of his bed, rubbing his face as the phone lit up again and again. He had expected attention. He had not expected this. Across the city, Steven Seagal stood alone on the courtyard floor of his private dojo. The wooden boards beneath his feet were smooth from decades of practice. Early sunlight cut through the open sides of the structure, laying long golden lines across the space. He held his phone in one hand, replaying the same short clip that millions were watching at that very moment. Jason stepping in. The punch starting. The space already empty. Stephen watched it without emotion. Then he locked the screen. From the doorway, a man in a simple training uniform entered quietly and bowed his head. "Sensei, the press has been waiting since before dawn." Stephen did not turn. "They always wait. They won't leave today." "They never do," he replied. On a set across town, Jason sat under the white heat of studio lights for an emergency interview arranged by a major streaming network. The producers wanted control of the story before it swallowed the project entirely. The host smiled with practiced calm as the cameras rolled. "Jason, the world just watched what looked like a serious confrontation between you and Steven Seagal. People are calling it the greatest unscripted moment in modern action history. What really happened?" Jason leaned back in the chair, arms folding across his chest. His jaw was tense. "It wasn't planned," he said carefully. "We were in the same training space. Energy was high. Some movements were exchanged." "Some movements," the host repeated with a polite tilt of her head. "Others are saying you tried to take him down." A flicker crossed Jason's eyes. "I respect Stephen, always have. But if someone steps into my space, I respond. That's all it was." The host smiled, then delivered the question she'd been saving. Steven Seagal released a statement this morning. He said, Jason does not yet understand what he has started. What did he mean by that? For the first time, Jason hesitated before answering. The words from the night replayed faintly in his mind. The way Steven had moved, the way he had spoken about intention. Then he should tell me himself, Jason said finally. By noon, Steven stood behind a row of microphones outside a quiet martial arts center in Beverly Hills. He wore no robe this time, only simple dark clothing. Reporters filled the street. Cameras pressed forward. The noise was relentless. I know what people are saying, Steven began, and I know what they think they saw. But a few seconds of footage never shows the truth. A reporter shouted, "Did Jason Statham attack you?" Another added, "Will there be a rematch?" Steven waited for the noise to soften. Jason and I come from very different worlds of movement, he said. His is fast, direct, physical. Mine is something else. When two paths cross without preparation, there is always imbalance, and sometimes energy collides. The crowd leaned forward. And if he wants clarity, Steven continued calmly, he knows where to find me. By evening, the world had chosen sides. Team Jason, Team Steven. Actors, fighters, stunt coordinators, and fans all planted their flags in digital sand. Debates raged across live streams and comment feeds. The story grew larger than both men combined. Late that night, Jason sat alone in his home gym. The lights were low. Sweat darkened the floor beneath him. The press conference replayed on a muted screen across the room. Steven's final words echoed in his head. If he wants clarity, he knows where to find me. Jason shut off the screen and stood still for a long moment. The noise of the city pressed faintly through the walls. Helicopters passed somewhere above. Cameras waited outside without rest. This isn't about the cameras, he muttered. He grabbed his keys. The road leading up into the hills was strangely empty for Los Angeles. Jason's black SUV moved through thin layers of mist, headlights cutting narrow tunnels of light through the dark. He was not thinking about social media. He was not thinking about headlines. This was between him and one man. The tall wooden gates of the dojo came into view at the end of the long drive. A single security guard stepped forward as Jason rolled to a stop. There was no surprise in the man's eyes. "Mr. Statham," the guard said, "you're expected." The gates opened without argument. Warm lantern light illuminated the stone path as Jason walked toward the main hall. The place felt old, heavy with history. Every step seemed to echo longer than it should have. Inside, Steven waited. He stood at the center of the wooden floor, hands folded in front of him, posture calm and balanced. No anger, no defense, only readiness. Jason stepped through the doorway. The sliding panels closed softly behind him. For a long moment, neither man spoke. "You came quickly," Steven said at last. "You called me out in front of the world," Jason replied. "Did you expect me to stay home and write an email?" A faint smile touched Steven's lips. "Sit." Jason shook his head. "Save the ceremony. You said I don't understand what I started. Explain." Steven studied him. "What you saw on that mat was not the full event. You saw movement. You did not see consequence." "It was a spar," Jason countered, "not the end of the world." "That depends," Steven said quietly, "on who was watching." He turned to a small wooden table and picked up a thin envelope. Jason opened it. Inside were photographs, grainy surveillance images taken from above. Jason arriving at the soundstage. Vehicles parked along distant streets. Men in suits watching from shadows. Time stamps burned into each corner. Jason's expression darkened. "What is this?" "Those men do not follow celebrities," Steven said. "They follow assets, weapons, combat value." "And why are they following me?" "Not you," Steven replied. "Us." Jason stiffened. "You think that was staged?" he asked. The confrontation was real, Stephen answered. The opportunity was not. Jason paced slowly across the wooden floor. Then who? There is an organization that does not exist on paper, Stephen said. They recruit fighters, military specialists, anyone with a reputation that carries power. Symbols attract followers. Followers create leverage. Jason stopped. And you think they leaked the footage? They needed the world watching, Stephen said. Now they are. The tension in the room shifted. So what do they want? Jason asked. To see which side we choose. Before he could answer, a metallic click echoed faintly from beyond the walls. Stephen's eyes narrowed. They're here. The metallic click echoed again, louder this time, followed by the soft, controlled rhythm of boots against stone. The lantern flames along the outer corridor shivered as shadows slid across the paper panels of the far door. Jason Statham shifted his weight back without thinking, muscle memory taking over. Steven Seagal remained perfectly still, but the calm in his posture sharpened into focus, like steel drawn slow from a sheath. Looks like your guests didn't wait for an invitation, Jason muttered. They never do, Stephen replied quietly. The doors exploded inward in a burst of splintered wood and dust. 3 figures stormed through first, clad in matte black tactical armor, visors down, weapons already raised. 2 more followed half a second behind them, spreading wide, scanning the room with cold, mechanical precision. The air filled with the low hum of suppressed firepower, ready to discharge. One of the armored men stepped forward. His voice came out flat, amplified. Jason Statham, Steven Seagal, you are requested for immediate acquisition. There will be no conflict if you comply. Jason tilted his head with a humorless smile. That what you call this? A request? The man lifted his weapon a fraction higher. This is your final. He never finished the sentence. Stephen moved first. There was no dramatic wind-up, no explosive charge. His body shifted with smooth inevitability, closing distance as if the floor itself had carried him forward. His hand rose and turned the leader's weapon upward at the exact instant the trigger tightened. The suppressed shot cracked into the ceiling instead of the room. Jason launched at the same time. His elbow crashed into the visor of the second operative with a dull, violent thud. A knee followed, driving the man back into the wall hard enough to rattle the wooden beams. The remaining operatives surged forward in perfect coordination, but they were already a fraction too late. Stephen pivoted through their advance like water flowing around rocks. Each movement was circular, unbroken. A wrist turned, a nerve point compressed, a shoulder folded at the wrong angle. Weapons clattered to the floor, one by one, with sharp metallic echoes. He never struck to injure more than necessary. He simply ended motions before they could begin. Jason fought like fire. A spinning back kick launched one attacker clean over a bench. A palm strike shattered another visor and sent the man down in a limp heap. Every blow landed with explosive finality, decisive and brutal, born of speed and precision. Between them, the dojo became a storm of motion and collapsing balance. 15 seconds. That was all it took. 5 armored bodies lay scattered across the wooden floor, some groaning, some utterly still. The silence afterward was sudden and vast, broken only by Jason's steady breathing and the faint crackle of a fallen lantern struggling to stay lit. Jason shook out his shoulders. Well, he said lightly, that escalated fast. Stephen did not respond. He knelt beside one of the motionless men and reached beneath the armor, fingers searching with practiced certainty. He pulled free a small black device no larger than a matchbox, its surface blinking with a faint red pulse. A tracker, he said, examining it. Then he turned it over. And a transmitter. Jason frowned. Meaning what? Stephen closed his hand around the device and crushed it. Sparks spat between his fingers, before dying on the floor. Meaning they weren't just here to take us, they were here to confirm something. Jason's eyes narrowed. Confirm what? Stephen rose slowly. Whether we would fight each other, or together. The answer hung heavily between them. From outside the dojo, engines rumbled. Not one. Many. Their vibrations rolled through the stone path and up into the wooden frame of the building like distant thunder. Jason exhaled through his nose. So, that was the test? Yes, Stephen replied. And now they have their result. Headlights flared against the paper walls as vehicles swept into position around the compound. Shadows of armed men moved across the panels in wide, overlapping patterns. Boots hit stone in disciplined waves. Jason glanced toward the doors. Got a plan. For now, Stephen said, brushing dust from his robe. Stay close. A crooked grin pulled at the corner of Jason's mouth. Thought you'd never ask. The outer doors shuddered as something heavy struck them from the other side. The lanterns flickered again, wildly this time. The quiet of the dojo transformed into the tight, vibrating stillness that always came just before violence. Jason cracked his knuckles once, slow and deliberate. No matter what they offer, he said, eyes locked on the trembling entrance. I didn't come here to switch teams. Stephen lowered into his stance, calm and unshakable. Good, because this alliance won't be easy to break. The doors buckled inward as the next wave of attackers lined up beyond them. Dozens of silhouettes moved in disciplined formation. The sound of controlled breathing filtered through the cracks. Jason shifted his footing. You ready? Stephen's voice was low and steady. I've been ready since the day they decided to watch us. The first door panel split apart under the impact of a breaching charge. Wood shattered. Light flooded in. Jason took one step forward, and the real fight began. This story has come to an end, but its meaning stays with us longer than it may seem. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and write in the comments where you are watching from. Many powerful stories are still ahead.